This is the Anthrobiology Podcast, hosted by me, Gabby LaPera. Every 2 weeks, I interview a biological anthropologist about what makes us, us. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Anthrobiology Podcast. Joining me here today is Rick Coste, and you may be familiar with him, and in fact, you may actually listen to his show, Evolution Talk. I'm really excited to have you on, Rick. How are you?
I'm doing great, and thank you for having me on. I was very excited to have the opportunity to talk to you today.
Of course. I feel like we have if you look at a Venn diagram of our viewership, I feel like there's probably pretty significant overlap.
You're absolutely right. We were talking about it right before, clicking record for the show, and I think your audience is pretty much the same audience I have in a lot of respects. I wouldn't be surprised if we have some of the same listeners.
Yeah, absolutely. For people who are unfamiliar with your show, can you give them a little elevator pitch?
Yeah. So Evolution Talk is a show I started back in 2014. It was my second major show. And it really takes the concepts of evolution from the history of evolution to some of the thinkers pre-Darwin, all the way up to the present, and puts it into bite-sized episodes. And that's by design. A lot of the episodes are no more than, I think the longest one might be 15 minutes, but usually anywhere between 8 to 15 minutes, depending on the subject and how much I want to pack into it. But it's also a show that I try to keep it entertaining. So it's scripted with a couple of exceptions. But there's music and effects to supplement the audio, just to keep folks interested, because we have a lot of younger listeners who listen to the show, who may be just starting college, or might be still in high school. So I do hear from those listeners quite often.
Yeah, I'm actually glad that you described your your podcast the way you do. And that slip of the tongue is actually because your book is structured in a very similar manner, which I really appreciate. And that's part of the reason I had you on, is because you've written this book. I'm going to plug it for you. Evolution Talk, the who, what, why, and how behind the oldest story ever told. It's a great book. It's a really great book. And I think that the way that you've structured it is so clever. You do the history of people understanding evolution in the order of that. And you do these little bite-sized chunks of chapters that are super manageable to do. But you have that, you also, sorry, I'm just going to gush. I hope that's okay. You also have that gift that not everyone does have, which is you end a chapter and you kind of catch a few words on the next page for the start of the next chapter, and you're ooh, and you want to keep reading, even though you've already read five page chunks,
Yeah, well, thank you for that. That's really good to hear, because that is how I do write anyways. But then when you go back and you look through the first draft, after you finish the first draft and you start the second draft, you're like, okay, what can I add here to kind of whet the appetite for the following, the next chapter. So it's good to hear that you caught that and enjoyed that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I guess before we get into your book, I was actually wondering, can you talk a little bit about your background, because it is varied.
Yeah, it is. So do you want me to talk about podcasting background and just my work the last 12 years? Because you're right, there's been a lot going on the last few years.
I think my main question is, how did you end up on evolution? Because it's not where you started at all.
No, it's not. So I actually started on my first show in 2012 was it was a philosophy podcast, which no longer exists. It's not out there anymore, but it was called Philosophy Walk. And I maybe did 60 or 70 episodes of that. It was kind of my way to get my feet wet in podcasting and such. Loved it. And then I wanted to turn to evolution. And the reason for that was I'd been reading about it. I've devoured every book out there about evolution that I can think of. So I'd been reading about it for decades. And when I really got into podcasting, I thought, you know what, I can probably do a podcast based on evolution and kind of give back in a way, take the everything I'd learned, break it down, put it into, like I said, bite-sized chunks for somebody to digest and understand it. And I've been writing since I was a kid, so I thought, well, I can script it, I can add effects and all of this. Because another thing I was always into was like old radio shows when I was young. Like my dad used to collect those because the radio shows were long gone by the time I was introduced to them, but he had records of those old shows like The Shadow and things like that. So I was always interested in audio and audio stories. So with Evolution Talk, I wanted to incorporate some of that. And I have a couple of episodes where I interviewed Darwin. I interviewed Charles Darwin in one of the episodes, interviewed Emma Darwin in another episode, had mitochondrial Eve in another episode where I kind of, a fictional character and interviewed mitochondrial Eve. So, and that was bringing audio drama into that. So had so much fun doing it. After a while, I thought, well, I'm going to move into audio drama for a bit. So I have quite a few audio drama shows, mainly geared towards a younger audience. So those are still out there. Those are all still available. All the while, I kept Evolution Talk going. Then I did some podcast work for Marvel, editing some of their shows, post-production. And here I am today, still pushing with Evolution Talk podcast. It's still having fun with it, still enjoying doing it. But yeah, it's been a love of mine for years, the subject. And it was kind of interesting how I even got into it in the first place. This is going back to, I think, my early 20s. It's funny. I got into it by being introduced to intelligent design. So I read about intelligent design and started thinking, you know what? There's more to this than what I'm reading here in these books. Started reading Richard Dawkins, and then of course the light bulb went off and just went full bore into the science of evolution, and that's been my love for decades now.
Yeah, that's a really interesting way to get into it.
Yeah.
For sure. I feel like I ran into evolution in the way that educators hope that young people will run into evolution, which is in school.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like I the first time I encountered the concept of evolution was in a science class, being taught by a science teacher who had no qualms about teaching evolution.
Right. Yeah.
And so I sometimes I wonder, like, and I grew up in Virginia, and I know that there was like an intelligent design debate happening around me, but it's funny because I think I didn't really understand intelligent design.
Yeah. Same here. And it was just, I heard it on, I don't remember how I ran across the term, to be honest with you. But I was like, what's this all about? I bought a book on intelligent design, read it, and realized, they're not really telling the full story here. So, what's really going on? And that was kind of that was the gateway into learning what evolution really was.
Yeah, and it for me too, it's been interesting talking to people who are like, I don't know how to put it other than like evolution deniers, I guess, or like people who really promote intelligent design or creationism, because a lot of the times they'll try and ask you, well, not a lot of the times, but sometimes they'll try and ask you like gotcha questions.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
But like the thing is that it relies on a misunderstanding of science. So like sometimes I don't even understand the question that I'm being asked. I bet you get that all the time.
Like one of the second law of thermodynamics that comes up, they'll throw that at me.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So that's exactly what I was thinking of. The first time someone asked me that, they were like, doesn't evolution break the second law of thermodynamics? I was so baffled. I was like, what are you talking about? And they're like, well, the second law of thermodynamics. I'm like, do you know the second law of thermodynamics? And they're like, don't you?
You're right. Yeah.
And I was like, no, I'm very confused what that has to do with evolution.
It's like a grocery list of questions, but they don't quite understand what they're asking.
Yeah. And as a result, like when every time I got hit by one of those questions for the first time, I was like, I feel dumb because I have literally no idea what you're talking about. I was like, and most of the time I was in a place where I could be like, let me go sit down, read, and figure out what it is exactly you're asking me, and then I'll come back and explain it.
Perfect. Yeah, I love it. Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's very confusing, and that's actually something. Before I talked to you, I went and I listened to a bunch of your episodes, and I was like poking around on your Apple Podcast page, and I think an interesting thing that happens on your show that doesn't happen on mine, probably because my show you have to have like some level of knowledge to like look for biological anthropology. Um,
Hmm.
but uh, people leaving reviews about how evolution isn't real happens on your
Yeah,
show, which doesn't ever happen on mine, but I talk about evolution a fair bit.
right. Yeah. 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 It's funny. And one of the funniest reviews on there, at least to me, but it was a 5-star review, and the person went on to say that the reviewer said that it was all hogwash. They, Rick does a wonderful job explaining the theory of evolution, but none of it is true. And then they went on to say why for a couple sentences, but still gave me a 5-star review, so I didn't quite know how to feel about that. Like, thank you.
Excellent work on this piece of fiction.
Right.
Oh
Yeah.
my gosh, that's so funny. I think the most infuriating review I ever had left was a 1-star review, and someone said she doesn't say how much the show costs, and I was like,
What?
it's free. How, what? You can see they're all there. um.
That is too funny.
Anyway, so
Yeah.
let's talk a little bit. Let's talk a little bit about this book. I was you do this kind of like walk through history in a way that is, I think, like really compelling. And I was wondering, is there anyone, is there any character is the wrong word, but I guess historical figure. Is there any historical figure that like really stood out to you while you were writing this?
That really stood out. Well, if I had to, well, I guess I'll say the first one that springs to mind when you ask the question is Robert Chambers. Robert Chambers has always fascinated me. Just the fact that he wrote a book, I think it was 1844, the vestiges of, I'm going to space out now that I'm put on the spot, the vestiges of, oh boy, creation, or whatever the name of his book was. Now I'm embarrassing myself, so I can't even think about it, thinking I have a whole chapter on it. But anyhow, he wrote a book about the transmutation of species in 1844, and at the time, I believe that's what they called evolution. It was always the transmutation of species. So Robert Chambers, when he was first writing his book, he wanted to capture the history of the world the way he saw it, and he was going to originally leave transmutation out of it because he didn't really buy into it at first. As he learned more, he really loved the idea of that species evolved into other species. So he included that in his book, and he also published it anonymously because of the fact that it was very controversial at the time. I mean, this was 1844. Those ideas were heretical still at that point. So he published it anonymously, and nobody knew who he was for decades. I mean, there was rumors that Robert Chambers had written it, but no one actually knew. So the funny part about that, and I think one of the reasons why I really kind of fixated on Robert Chambers, especially when you asked the question, was Charles Darwin read that book, read Chambers' book, saw the controversy around that, and it was part of the reason why Darwin wanted to make sure everything that he was writing about evolution by natural selection, all of his ideas, he wanted to make sure that they were solid before he ever published anything. He may never have even published his book had Alfred Russel Wallace had he not come along at the time he did. I'm positive that Darwin would not have published his book for quite some time afterwards.
Yeah, I still remember learning about Alfred Russel Wallace and feeling it was a little bit like that race to go patent the telephone.
Yeah,
You know what
yeah,
I mean?
yeah, I
And
do.
I always felt like a little bit bad for him, but I think ultimately his name does come up in the history books quite a bit, and it is associated with Darwin. So maybe he won.
Yeah, I mean, he does. I love the fact that he is brought up a lot, and in a lot of places too, you'll see evolution by natural selection as discovered by Charles Darwin and Alfred Russel Wallace. So his name is mentioned, but he is overshadowed. I mean, it
Hmm.
really is Charles Darwin's theory of evolution by natural selection is what you'll hear, 95% of the time. But I'm always pleased when I see Wallace's name mentioned or brought into it. And even from what I read about Wallace over the past few years, Wallace was he he seemed like such a gracious person. He was very excited that Darwin took interest in his work. He was a big promoter of Darwin's work. I mean, for years. I mean, they had some differences, not personality differences, but differences in opinion. I think specifically around sexual selection and such. But they kept up a friendship, and Wallace was always very very appreciative of Darwin helping to get his work out there.
Yeah. Yeah. I think another thing that I actually really appreciated about your book is I'd never really read a history of the theory of evolution all the way through. It always like kind of started. It was like if you did hear about the history of evolution, you would hear about Lamarck,
Yeah,
then you hear about Wallace and Darwin, and that's it.
right.
And I think that reading this gave me it's interesting because some of those early thinkers, like even though they weren't necessarily right,
Yeah, yeah,
some of their thoughts like are kind of like a natural way to think about evolution early on, and like you still see some people say similar things, especially Lamarck. Um,
yeah, yeah. Lamarck's another favorite of mine.
yeah,
But in Benoit de Maillet, I mean, they were talking about, they had evolutionary thoughts, or thought, I should say, yeah, thoughts about evolution way before Darwin came along. I mean, like you said, they were mistaken in a lot of ways, but they were still thinking along those lines. And had they perhaps been of another century, they might have gotten there before Darwin did. They came really close. Even Darwin's grandfather Erasmus was, the one line he had about the single filament, and then it all sprung from there. I mean, he was actually right. It's just he didn't know how it sprung or what the driving force was behind it, and that's what Charles Darwin brought to the table.
yeah. And just to back up a little bit for listeners, Erasmus Darwin had this like kind of it almost feels like a throwaway line in his book about a single filament that's the origin.
Yes. Mm,
And that was basically his way of like kind of like subtly introducing like, all life probably came from one original ancestor, which
yep.
is true.
Yeah. That is so true. Yeah, there's always a little, like, even Dennis Diderot, you mentioned Lamarck. They all had one little seed of truth in there, and when you look at the big picture, they were all on the same path that Darwin settled on, and that's always amazed me because some of these early thinkers were, you know, centuries before Darwin and still had those thoughts. And I love that fact and seeing how close they were in certain ways.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that like you see this reflected in the way that science currently works too, right? Like I think a lot of people think it's like there wasn't the theory of evolution and then one day Charles Darwin woke up and wrote it.
Right. Yeah,
um, but
exactly.
that's not the case, right? Like there was a lot of other thought that existed that went into it, and that Darwin was familiar with, that he built on, and like yes, he was brilliant, like no one's gonna argue otherwise, but there were a lot of other thinkers that like kind of went into the stew that created
Yeah,
evolution. And
yeah.
modern science works the same way. If anything, it works even faster. Like things very rarely come out of a vacuum, just like a stroke of divine insight.
You're so right. It all builds upon it. It could be somebody else's work, kind of standing on the shoulders of giants, type of thing,
Hmm.
or it could be a group of people all pursuing the same thing. But yeah, there's probably very few examples where it's just an idea out of whole cloth that just pops up. It all builds.
Yeah, I've always been really interested in this idea or like, I guess this kind of story that I've told myself about how certain ideas are kind of in the ether at a certain time period where there's like a lot of people who
Just
are like
right.
very
Or
close, you know, and
yeah.
then all of a sudden it just like breaks out all at once. You know what I mean?
Yep, yeah. I think that that's another really good point because I've often looked at things like the iPhone, the creation of the iPhone. It came at the right time, and it didn't have to be Apple. It didn't have to be Steve Jobs. It could have been somebody else, maybe a couple years later. It was almost inevitable that it would have happened because all the technology was there at the right time for it to occur. Just Steve Jobs and Apple happened to get there first.
Mm-hmm.
But you're right. It's almost like it is in the ether. It's almost like it builds towards this great idea or this great invention, and then it just explodes.
Right. And of course, like we have the benefit of looking back and being like, oh, of course, like look at
Right.
all these
That makes
threads that
connect
come
the dots.
together.
Yeah,
Exactly.
that's so true. Yeah.
But like leading up to that, like there's no foregone conclusions anywhere. Like who knows what other things never came to be.
So true. Yeah, I know, and that I always think about that too. Is like all of these, you know, great writers, thinkers, philosophers, and who may have never published their work or wrote an entire book and it's sat in a drawer, collected dust. And how much did we miss because of that? Because they didn't put their work out there or make their ideas known. There's probably a lot of that.
Yeah, certainly. I wanted to talk to you a little bit too about, I believe it's part 3 of your book, Evolution Tales,
Yeah.
which is I thought another good way to approach evolution, because like the first part of the book is really about the history of the theory of evolution, but then part 3 is all about evolution, like the history of evolution on our planet. Um, and you basically start again from the beginning and like work your way through. Um, is there a particular chapter or again like a particular story that you like about evolution?
Hmm. And in Evolution Tales, was there one that jumps out at me? Probably, if I had to pick one, I really enjoyed writing the chapter on brains. And that I believe that comes near towards the end of that part 3 or that third section of the book. So that one was one I enjoyed writing. That one stands out to me as kind of a personal favorite. Then there was another chapter that had to do with, is everything related? I enjoyed writing that. So there are certain chapters that kind of jumped out at me that were very easy for me to write. And brains and consciousness and the evolution of consciousness has always fascinated me. So I could probably have written an entire book just on that subject alone.
I think that makes sense from someone who had a philosophy podcast first.
True. Yeah, that's right.
And brains are crazy. I spend, I guess, because mostly just me and Andy. Hey, Andy. Um, we spend a fair amount of time on the show just talking to people about brains, and like this is something that anthropology spends a lot of time talking about.
Yeah.
Like, how did we end up with the brains that we have as humans? Because our brains are nuts. Like they're crazy.
And the way they're designed and built. I mean, if you were not you, but if you're speaking to somebody who is, if you were talking to someone who is promoting intelligent design, all you have to do is point to the brain and say, there is no intelligent design behind how brains are put together. They were built upon one small piece, another piece was added, and it evolved over billions of years to the point it is now. But it's not if we were going to design a brain, it wouldn't and perform the same things it does, it wouldn't look like the one we have now.
Yeah, for sure. It. I was actually visiting a friend's house this weekend in Monterey, and their house was built in the 1950s
Yeah.
originally, but you can tell where people just like added on
Yeah.
random rooms. So, like for example, their bathroom, their guest bathroom was next to the living room, but it also just led straight into the music room. And
Yeah.
so, in order to go to the bathroom, you would have to close 2 doors.
Oh, that's too
In
funny.
that house. And it's a totally functional house, and it fit whatever the needs were at the time of the people who like put it together. You know, I'm pretty sure that that music room used to be a garage, but now there's another garage attached to the house, you know? So it's like, and that house grew a lot like our brains did over time.
That's a good point. You made me think of a house that I see that's built much the same way as what you're explaining. I'll go for like a run in the morning. I get up very early in the morning. And there's one house that always fascinated me because you have a street of, very nice homes, very nice houses, and then this one house that looks just like what you described. Looks like somebody just took pieces, slapped them. It's like a Lego set that doesn't match. And and that house always catches my eye. It's every time I run by it, I see something, a new little piece, only on the externally, because I've never seen the inside. I can't imagine what that looks like. But I'll always see a different piece on the outside. It's like, what were they doing? When was that put there?
Yeah. Yeah, but it was functional at the time, and like it works now for whoever lives there.
Yeah.
I think the other really cool thing, there's just so much. Brains are really cool. Um is what people should be getting from this little segment. Because we keep learning more and more about our brains and how they work and how wonderfully plastic they are, which is not something that a lot of people think of when they think of their brains. A lot of people think of it as a very static organ, but it's really not.
No, and they rewire all the time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Which also serves, evolutionary purposes. It's just so interesting. I think I've kind of lost the plot now a little bit because I got so excited about brains. I was wondering, why did you choose to write this book?
Well, I actually had an idea for 2 or 3 different books before I settled on this book. But the other 2 books that, and I'm actually writing one of them now. I'm in the just finished the first draft of the second book, which will kind of be a follow-up to Evolution Talk, but it takes things in a whole different direction. But I felt like at least the other ideas I had for books needed a base, something to kind of start from. And it just made sense for me to use what I had done for the podcast and adapt it to text and to use that. Plus, there was a lot of, this is kind of like a part 2 answer to that question. I'm always receiving requests for transcripts because I don't have transcripts of the show out there. I did in the early years, and then I changed web hosts, and long story, but lost a lot of those transcripts and never got around to putting them back together. So I do get a lot of requests for transcripts from either students, or I had one from a professor in Canada who wanted to use the transcripts for some of his students. And so I thought, you know what, maybe I'll just kind of kill 2 birds with one stone. I'll have the book that I wanted to start as a base to jumpstart the other books, or to serve as a base for the other books. And also, when I receive those requests, I can just point them to the book and say pretty much everything for the first 90 episodes of Evolution Talk, not all of it, but a lot of it is in this. So if you're looking for something as an introduction for your students, instead of transcripts of episodes, here it is in a nice, neat package with a lot of, extra material and such.
That makes sense. Can I ask you what you're planning on writing next, or what you're currently writing?
Yeah, so the book that's coming, that I'm working on now is all about, I guess the best way to put it is, throughout history we've always thought we were special as a species. We always thought humanity was special. That it goes back to geocentric view of the universe. That the sun and the stars and everything revolved around the Earth, which we come to, science told us that's not true. And then we thought that we were specially created as a species, humanity, Homo sapiens, and that we were the only ones. But that's not true either. There was the Neanderthal, the Denisovans. There was a lot of hominid species before us, and also that lived alongside us at the same time, Homo floresiensis, for example. One of my favorites, because like the little hobbit. So science told us again, we're not special. We're just one of many. We just happen to be the one that survived to this day. And we're also not special even our planet's not special. We're just this small little planet in a small little galaxy in a universe of a billion galaxies. So the book kind of traces all of these kind of dominoes that say we're special because we're special because we're special because we have a consciousness or morality, which we are not special in that respect. There are other other species also have a consciousness, also have a sense of morality in the form of altruism and or altruistic behaviors. So I just kind of knock all these dominoes down throughout the book. And by the end of the book, I I realized, this book sounds kind of nihilistic at the very end of it. Also, I need to kind of turn it all around and say, all hope is not lost. We might not be special, but and it's kind of, it's now that I'm talking about it, the book did come as a result of a couple of the chapters in Evolution Talk. There is a chapter on are we special or are we unique and such. And I wanted to expand on that, but kind of knock all those dominoes down, set them up and knock them down and kind of an appreciation of science, because science is the one that's showing us, that we are not special in any way, shape, or form. We're just here. But that being said, is there something about us that does make us special? And then I kind of end the book on that note as a spoiler to everybody.
I think for me, one of the things that science does is like it shows you um how how unspecial you are, but at the same time, like each organism, like each species, each individual, like there's like a joy, like there is something special about each one of those, and like how finely they've adapted to their
Mm,
circumstances. Like it's one of those things where it's like it's like going out into a blizzard, right? Like
yeah,
yes, there's like a lot of individual snowflakes. You can't differentiate them from afar, but like all of them together still make something really special. And each individual one, if you look at it up close, is still special.
yeah,
It's just completely a matter of your perspective. And it's like, um, when I was a kid, I used to like get really excited about like certain topics, and I would just talk about them nonstop, and people would be like, "Ah, like really? Oh, I really wish you could stop." But like, I think scientists have a lot of that same thing, right? Where like they just like get so excited about like their particular topic, and people are like, "Really? Like you're super excited about fishing spiders? Like they're just spiders, but it's like no, like there's so many intricate interesting things about like this like one species of spider that like the more you delve into it, the more you're like, can these spiders tell us truths about what it means to be a being on this earth? And the answer is yes, like it's true for
yeah,
any of them. And
right.
here now I'm getting hippy dippy and philosophical with you.
Yeah, but just, and it's true, and it's funny you say that too, because there are topics. I mean, obviously, I love the topic of evolution and such, but there are topics in philosophy that you get me started on it, and I will talk about it all night long.
Hmm.
And if I have an ear that's curious about this particular topic that I'm passionate about, they'll get sick of listening to me. They'll be like,
that's
"Oh, why did you bring that up with Rick again?"
that's how my friends feel about cannibalism right now. Every time we go out to dinner, they're like, "Can we just wait till after we're done?" I'm like, "It's fine for me because I'm vegetarian."
Yeah, right. That's the best.
um, no, I so one of the things I always do on the show is like we talk about books. Obviously, we're talking about your book, but I think if someone is interested in kind of like the idea of oh, now I have like two book recommendations. So let's start with John Mark's Why Are There Still Creationists? I really love that book, and I think it's a great companion to your book, because he goes through the history of creationist thought. And I think that like both of your books together is like it's just like a really wonderful duo. And of course, his book Why Are There Still Creationists is a play on the question that I'm sure you've been asked: if we came from
Yeah.
monkeys, why are there still monkeys?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So I strong recommend like both of those books together if you have the chance. And then my recommendation for a fiction book this time around is actually a series by Becky Chambers. um, that is about, it's basically like just people in space, I guess I should say different species in space and like their reactions to things that are going on. There's like a lot of like meditations on what it means to be sentient and human and like
Yeah. Oh, wow. Yeah.
be in the universe. And I mean, in the background, there's like things going on, like they're going to a planet and they get shot up. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I think it's a combination of all the best things. The first book in that series is called A Long Way from a Small Angry Planet. But my favorite book in the series is Record of a Spaceborne Few. It's only 3 books, so the middle book's okay too. It's no, it's good. It's good.
Did they just come out? Are these like current books?
Um, I think that they've been out for a little while now. I really like them, and I think they've won a few awards. If you like science fiction, slash, if you like, I think if you like Star Trek, you'll probably like these books.
Oh, cool. Yeah, it's one of my favorite shows.
Yeah, me too. Because I'm super cool and not a nerd at all. uh, no, sorry, I think I preempted you a little bit too, which is that I normally ask the guest what are 3 books that they would recommend. And the first there's like a whole architecture to these questions. And the first one is what is a book that you would recommend to people so that they could become more familiar with your work?
More familiar with my work.
And this is typically the place where you should plug the book that you're on the show for.
Well, see, I was going to do a really bad job of it, and I was going to like plug someone else's book, but well, thank you for saying that.
You're welcome. No one ever thinks to plug their own book, but I'm like, you literally just wrote a book about your own work.
I see, and I'm the worst marketer and promoter in the whole world. I could write books all day long, but promoting them, not so much. So thank you for doing that and tossing me the softball.
You're literally one in a line of many who try to tell me other people's books, and I'm like, no.
All right, so the book I would recommend to find out more about my work and the things I am interested in would be the Evolution Talk book, which will be coming out in October. October 15th is being released by Prometheus Books, and as well as the ebook, which should be available everywhere. The book will be available everywhere, and the audio book will also be released as well at the same time. And I yours truly got to narrate that. So the publisher asked me to narrate the book since I was, had familiarity with podcasting and audio, and they thought it would be good for the audience of the book to, if someone wanted to purchase the audiobook, to hear my voice, doing the narration for that. So that's October 15th. I believe if over, like in England and overseas, I think it's December 15th for some reason. It's a couple months later.
And I can also strongly recommend your podcast to people, also called Evolution Talk.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. And there are new episodes for anybody who's listening and is interested. So there'll be more to come on in the podcast.
Excellent. Second question is, what are you reading right now for work?
Okay, so right now I'm reading a book called Reality Plus. It's by David Chalmers, who's a philosopher, and his main kind of body of work in the past was about consciousness, which is another one of my favorite subjects, since we talked about brains earlier too. But this book is really, I love this book, and I would highly recommend Reality Plus to anybody who's at all interested in philosophy, because it kind of, I like the way he writes, and he also brings in almost every idea in the past that has to, a lot of the major philosophical ideas in the past into the book, because the book's all about virtual worlds and the power of philosophy. So he talks about virtual worlds and is it reality? He's talking about immersive virtual world. Like, how do we know we're not in a simulation? He's approaching it from that aspect. So, and it touches on consciousness. It touches on metaphysics. How do we know it's real? It touches on how do we know anything? How do we know anything at all? How can we know? How can we know anything about the external world? So the book kind of, in a very easy to read way for somebody who's, if you're not new to philosophy, he touches on these different subjects and also kind of will link them to what's popular out there. He'll mention Rick and Morty, say, in the chapter, or things like that, just to kind of draw little ties to folks who might not be interested in it. And I've always liked his work, so the book just came out recently, so I had to grab it. So that's what I'm reading now.
Excellent. And then the last question is, what are you consuming for fun? Or a book, kind of whatever is keeping you entertained right now.
I actually I picked up I don't know if you call it an omnibus or whatever the case may be, but Saga. It was I don't know if you're familiar with Saga, but it was a comic book put out by Image. Brian K. Vaughan is the writer and Fiona Staples is the artist, and they have they put it all together, all of the individual issues into a giant graphic novel that's heavier than a dictionary. I mean, it's huge. so I'm reading that now, and I'm almost done that because they had put that particular series on hiatus for, I want to say, since pre-COVID, but now they're picking the series back up. So I had read the series back then, but picked up this big compendium of all of the past issues to kind of reacclimate myself to the story, so that I can start reading the new issues as they come out, which just started, I think, in the last 5-6 months.
That's awesome. Perfect.
Yeah. And I highly recommend that series. It's amazing. It is amazing.
Yeah. I already put in my plugs for books today. But no, yeah, I that sounds really interesting. I'm always excited to have other people on who really care about evolution. And it's always exciting to have someone on too who has kind of come to science in a natural way, like kind of on their own, because I have a lot of researchers on, which is really exciting. And they obviously came to science in their own way as well. But like, it's a different perspective when you have someone who's like, I'm not an active researcher, but I still love this so much that I'm devoting a portion of my life to it. Like, that's really, really cool.
Well, thanks. It's a huge part of my life. I mean, it just producing episodes, doing the research, and I try to keep up on everything that's happening now in evolution. I mean, things happen so fast. It's like almost every week there's a new, either a new line of work that's shedding light on something nobody knew before, or thought of before, or it's reinforcing older ideas. I don't know. It's such an exciting topic for me.
It's really funny because like things in evolution research are moving so fast, and it's funny because they study something that moves fairly slow.
Imperceptibly slow. You're so right.
Yeah.
And even talking about past hominid species. I mean, up until 20 years ago, all we knew about is the Neanderthal, and now it's just kind of branching out. I mean, there's many that we don't know about. There's so many we do.
Yeah, it's been interesting because I feel like other, like, I think Neanderthals definitely like dominate the public perception of like,
yeah, right,
of the evolutionary past for us. But like, I feel like people are becoming more and more familiar with things like Homo erectus, or even if not Homo erectus, like I can say to someone, do you know who Lucy is? Like, have you heard of Lucy? And they're like, oh yeah, like that skeleton in Africa. I was like, yes. It's, it's slowly, I think it's like slowly percolating into the public consciousness, which is really cool. Just like you're doing with your show and your book. On that note, thank you very, very much for joining us. I really loved having you on.
Thank you. I really enjoyed it. I loved this conversation. I could do it all day.
Well, you're welcome back anytime. Thanks for joining me for this episode of the Anthrobiology Podcast. If you have questions or comments, you can reach me at gabby.lapera@anthrobiology.com. That's spelled GABY.LAPERA@anthrobiology.com. This show is produced by me. Music courtesy of Chad Crouch, aka Poddington Bear at Sound of Picture.